Hey guys, so welcome back to the channel. Yes, we do have to get back to some of the SJM updates, but frankly, there hasn't been that much that's been going on. We have been inundated with the drama that is the presidential election, and I promise we'll go over that as well. But a lot of you guys have been commenting on the 9-hour CCTV footage and been pouring over some of the details, and I love how you guys have been putting in your analysis, and I wanted to share some of my thoughts on one particular aspect: the Burberry Woman. Now remember how the Burberry Woman early on, something about this Burberry Woman, you know, this like super sus woman traipsing around, sashaying in her Burberry coat, just didn't jive right at 4 a.m. at the park. I mean, granted, yes, there are a lot of people there at that hour, but something about her just gave everybody the heebie-jeebies, and her silhouette throughout all of the CCTV analysis also gave us the heebie-jeebies, because there was something about how that flow in motion made her look like a ghost, and she was definitely like a ghost-like figure. So I want to go over some of the footage, and now that we see it in higher resolution, and I want to show you a little bit more of a zoomed in analysis that another YouTuber had done that really starts to show that she is a super sus person and should be a person of interest that we really need to track down and find out who she is, because she had a front row seat to the whole thing if she wasn't actually on stage. So the biggest red flag from the 9-hour CCTV footage was comparing the way that Mr. A walked back from the riverbank through the lawn to the bunny tunnel, and how Burberry Woman walked from the riverbank over the lawn to the bunny tunnel. It was as if Burberry Woman knew exactly how to fool or trick the CCTV cameras and trained Mr. A on how to do it, but gave him a critically different instruction at the end in order to give him an alibi. Now, there was something extremely off about making a zigzag motion through the grass, especially at that hour. If you're tired, you just want to walk from point A to point B. You just want to get home, right? Why would you kind of go in this circuitous motion, especially behind a pole? Now, Mr. A wasn't as talented or practiced at this, so you see Mr. A going back and forth, but the thing is to make it a little bit unclear to an untrained or somebody who's just like really not paying attention. If it ever came down to, you know, people having to review hours and hours of CCTV footage, it would be super obvious if Mr. A just made like one beeline from the riverbank and went straight to the bunny tunnel, right? So by making this motion back and forth, you kind of play with the shadows, and it's unclear like where you came from, and they make it extremely purposeful at the end to try to trick us that perhaps he didn't come from the riverbank, but he came from the left-hand side of your screen. So you'll see back when he comes out of the frame, it is from the right-hand side instead of just going directly. That's the same thing that Miss Burberry Woman does, but she stays out of the frame, except her sashaying coat gives her away through the shadows. So let's break this down. And reason why Mr. A, I think, purposefully was told to go straight into the middle and walk down like it was a catwalk was to give him full face time in the camera for an alibi, to make sure he got on camera. The difference was with Burberry Woman was to stay out of the camera, and she almost 100% would have, except her shadow from her jacket gave her away. Ironically, she was wearing Burberry and she decided not to walk the catwalk, or the runway. Mr. A had to, so that he can have an alibi, but nonetheless, her face and, all of her visage was captured inside the bunny tunnel, and we saw her looking really sus and kind of looked like there was a lot more going on under that coat. And so let's kind of go through this, because we start to see Mr. A's movement really appear at 4:31 a.m. And this is without even any digital zoom. So it looks like he's trying to camouflage himself and trick any lazy investigator who would run the 9-hour-long CCTV camera, because look at him at the end go purposefully out of the camera shot and pretend that he came from the left. And then it looks like he was trying to perhaps get the option of the story of like, oh, I was just wandering around, maybe looking for my friend. But remember, this time, this was like after he had supposedly been woken up on the riverbank by some passerby, right? And then he came, but why didn't he just like walk directly? Of course, they're going to say that he was drunk, and so maybe that's why he was stumbling around. But from a previous video, we've already analyzed that was not a drunk walk. Even the reenactment of the actor playing drunk walked a lot differently than the way Mr. A walked in real life. A person who is drunk is actually trying to maintain a center of balance vertically. And somebody who is exhausted is walking like this, which is more like his motion, like he was exhausted after doing a lot of physical exertion or something. And then there's the waddle, like if you're wet, which we saw from that super sus guy who went back to the convenience store to pick up his phone that was charging behind the counter. Real sus. And so in a previous video, we analyzed those 3 different walks. And so it looks like he was going out of the frame for about 15 seconds from 4:31 a.m. 25 seconds to about 4:31 a.m. 40 seconds. So good 15 seconds. What was he doing? It was as if he was like resetting, kind of going, making sure like he was sufficiently out of the camera shot, and then walked back in, and now it's time for him to walk the runway, and then he is going to go into the bunny tunnel, get his alibi. All right, so that is his zigzag. Now, okay, so that could have been just the way he did it, but why did Burberry Lady almost take the exact same route? Exact same course? We didn't see anybody else take the same course. It wasn't as if there was like kind of like a path there, like a, a yellow brick road that instructed people to go that way. This was a lawn. I have been there. There's no reason why you would zigzag that way. Now, the Burberry Lady seems like she has done this before. It seems like she is a veteran, and it certainly seems like she knows where the CCTV cameras are. So let's do a little bit of a refresher of this Burberry woman. She first shows up at around 4:14 a.m. She goes right up to the riverbank, to the grassy knoll, to the place where SJM fell. And she kind of looks around a little bit, and it looks like maybe they're not ready for her yet. And so she walks back and she takes a seat right behind a sign that you can't really see anything, but there after people have, saw the suspicious video, they went to the site and they saw like, okay, this is an area where there's a lot of benches and it's totally hidden by the CCTV. She sits there until 4:22 a.m. So it's about a good 8 minutes. She walks back to the same spot on the grassy knoll, that place where you go over the riverbank where SJM fell over and then the second guy went over, and she stays there from 4:23 a.m. to 4:58 a.m. That is like 30 minutes. What was she doing there for a full 30 minutes? Now, this is the absolutely super sus part, the timestamps of when she was there. Remember, the first time that they reported that Mr. A woke up was like 4:23 a.m. So it seems as if that maybe perhaps they wanted her to be the one that maybe claimed to have woken him up, and then they're like, oh no, he didn't wake up at 4:23, he woke up at 4:27, because the times didn't match up. If he had woken up at 4:23, it would have been too much time for him to have it didn't match the time for when he showed up at the bunny tunnel, so then they advanced that to later. Anyhow, she would have been there regardless at the time where he had woken up. So why didn't he even mention any fabulous woman wearing a fabulous Burberry coat right at the riverbank? I've shown you that. If you haven't seen the video, see the video at the riverbank. That place is really tiny. If there was a woman wearing a Burberry coat there for 30 minutes, you would have seen her. So I don't know why he never mentioned a woman in a Burberry coat. And second of all, this is exactly when, remember, at 4:40 a.m., the super sus set of 7 fishermen said that, oh, we saw somebody go into the water, splash around, and say how refreshing it was. She would have been right there. She would have had a front row seat to see who that was. So why isn't she brought in for questioning? And moreover, if the fisherman was able to see that, how come they couldn't have seen a super fabulous woman in a Burberry jacket right on the riverbank too? Now, we all know that these fishermen have long been debunked, because these fishermen, they don't even really add up to a group of 7, really. It looked like it was more of like an ad hoc situation where it wasn't really a unified group of 7. And the police suppressed the original testimony, where the police suppressed the information where the testimony said that they saw a middle-aged man supposedly enter the water and splash around and say how refreshing it was, not a 21-year-old medical student. So, and this whole testimony itself was suspicious because they didn't outright say it, but they tried to make the public buy a suggestion that, oh, it must have been SJM who just walked into the water and said how refreshing it was and splashed around after getting a concussion on his head. So that was debunked, but in the public, and still like the way that it's like being posited, it's still kind of like unanswered questions. And so in any event, she was right there. She would have been right there, unless perhaps, was she wearing a swimming cap? Does she kind of look a little butch if she goes swimming? Could she have been the one going how refreshing it was? Because if nobody saw her, maybe it was her in there. Because if she had been on the riverbank for a full 30 minutes and nobody reported her, then where'd she go? Where was she when Mr. A did not report this woman on the riverbank? Certainly the guy that woke up Mr. A would have seen a woman in a fabulous Burberry coat also on the riverbank with him. How come they didn't report it? There is something about this Burberry woman that does not add up. And I think, yes, it is important to focus on the 331 push, the 5 to 6 minutes that happened right after it as well. But we also, I think, have a gem of a potential discovery by tracking down this Burberry woman, because we have an extremely clear shot of Burberry woman. And so now at 4:58:35, we see her come up from the riverbank. So again, that was 30 minutes down there with nothing to do, okay? There's not even any seats, nothing. It's just rocks. You can't even sit down there. Like you will get stuff up your butt. It will hurt. You can't sit there for more than 2 seconds. 30 minutes, okay? 30 minutes. All right, so she comes up and she stands behind the pole for about 2 minutes. And so it also looks like there are 2 shadowy figures that she is interacting with for about 2 minutes. So could it be one of the guys that also like went to the convenience store looking like he had also gone for a swim, picking up his cell phone behind the counter of the convenience store? So she starts her zigzag walk. She's much more professional. She looks like a veteran. She knows how to maximize her time behind the pole that blocks the view. And we know that because she starts off very small and then suddenly she appears very big. So that means she's traversed quite a distance behind the pole. And then suddenly she has to, because she's forced to, move beyond the pole because she has to traverse to the side to get out of the range of the close-up, because you know she don't want to have any close-up, she don't want to do the catwalk, she don't want to do the runway, so she wants to go off to the side. But now she's trying to make it look like to the lazy observer of the CCTV, and you know, if they're somebody's analyzing it, that maybe she had just like popped up from the middle somewhere, you know, like maybe had like a late night picnic on the grass and she was just like kind of in the middle somewhere. You kind of really don't know like where she popped up from. That was probably the strategy from the beginning. And then we see her go out of the frame, and maybe that could have been it, you know, had it not been for her fabulous Burberry coat that sashayed all around, that left the mark of the shadow, the evidence that a lot of YouTubers really honed in on. And so then, I mean, we already have the confirmation. We track her back into the tunnel, and so we see her. And if you want to see the Burberry woman, check out the previous videos on our CCTV analysis. We go, you know, from the beginning, a very in-depth analysis of it, and it looks like there was a lot more going on underneath that Burberry coat. And it looks like she was carrying a lot of stuff, and it did not look like she was there for a picnic with other people. Did not look like she was even there for, like, what was she doing on the riverbank for 30 minutes? Okay, while Mr. A was there as well, while there were fishermen who also had a view of the riverbank and claimed to have seen someone go into the water from the riverbank. So why didn't they report Miss Burberry woman unless they were all working together? All right, so I think we need to perhaps, you know, add this to the pile of pursuable angles that actually are within reach, that perhaps now don't really rely on trying to shake down the government for access to the CCTV tapes. All right, guys, well, until next time, keep looking at the video, add your comments, and let's keep analyzing this together. All right, talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Tune in next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Love you.